Thanks for taking this journey with us. Help us to get this word out to as many people as we possibly can. I know you want that to happen. And here is how you do that. You give us a thumbs up on the program. Post your positive comments about the program. Subscribe to our channel. Click on the live notification option and share the link at the end of the program. Place a link in your emails, your texts. Place it on your friend's Facebook page, on your Facebook page. Just share a link to this program in every place possible. If you are a member of any organization, share this link at your organizational meeting. Put it on their website, put it in their bulletin flyer. If you are a part of a Facebook group, post it in that group so that people worldwide can hear the information that you hear. Today, we want to talk about instructions. Instructions almost seem like a dirty word. Nobody wants to be told what to do. And even saying it in that manner raises the hair on the head of some people. They would say, why don't you say ask instead of saying be told? Well, if they are authoritative instructions, the end game is the same. And if those instructions provide something of value, then you need to be obedient, however the instructions come. But there is just something in human beings that causes us to want to resist instructions. Sometimes children will do what they are supposed to do until they are told what they cannot do. And then being given instructions, a defiant spirit just resurrects within them. But from the very beginning, God gave instructions to his people. He gave solicitative instructions. Those are the instructions wherein he told people what to do. In Genesis chapter 1 and verse 28, he said to Adam and Eve, Adam who was created, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth. Those were solicitative instructions. But he also gave prohibitive instructions. Genesis 2, verses 15 through 17. In that case, he placed Adam in the garden and he said, you can eat of all the trees, but the tree that is in the midst of the garden, don't eat of it, because if you do, you're going to die. So those were prohibitive. Be fruitful and multiply, soliciting a behavior. Do not eat of the tree that's in the midst of the garden, preventing a behavior. Now, instructions invite an internal exhibition of your internal integrity. Let me say that again. Instructions invite an external exhibition of your internal integrity. When you receive instructions, you get a chance to externally place your internal integrity on display. In other words, when you receive instructions, you get a chance to place your external work, which shows your internal faith. So always think in terms when God gives instructions, they're not just instructions for the sake of instructions. They are instructions that give us an opportunity to put externally on display our internal faith. So instructions are nothing more than opportunities for us to place our faith on display, the integrity of our faith on display. Now, integrity is a concept of consistency of actions, consistency of values, consistency of methods, measures, principles, expectations, and outcomes. So instructions give us an opportunity to demonstrate a level of consistency. So your attitude toward instructions makes all the difference in the world. Your attitude toward instructions makes all the difference in the world. The writer John made this statement in the first epistle of John, chapter 5 and verse 3. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. See, this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments. So what is your attitude toward God's instructions? How do you feel? What do you think? Because how you feel, how you think will be controlling factors in how you behave. So what are the components that lead up to the behavior that you render? What's your faith? What's your internal consistency? What does it consist of? Following instructions exhibits the integrity of your faith. God shows that, demonstrates that, proves that, uses his interaction with Bible characters to display for us their external exhibition of their internal faith. Following instructions exhibits the integrity of your faith. When Abraham followed instructions, he exhibited the integrity of his faith. We're going to take a look at Genesis chapter 22 and verses 1 through 10. And there we will learn something about faith, external exhibition, internal integrity, by looking at the life of Abraham in Genesis chapter 22, verses 1 through 10. His integrity led Abraham to split the wood and journey to the place to offer the burnt offering. God had appeared to Abram and said, I want you to offer your son. What's Abram going to do? Listen to Genesis 22 and verse 3. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, took two of his young men with him, and Isaac his son. He split the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. On the third day, Abraham raised his eyes, saw the place from a distance. His integrity led him. His internal faith caused him to follow the instructions that God had provided. His integrity led Abraham to build the altar, arrange the wood, and bind the sacrifice, which was his son Isaac, for the burnt offering. Look again further at Genesis 22 and verse number 9. Then they came to the place of which God had told him, and Abraham built the altar there and arranged the wood and bound his son Isaac, laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Now, why did he do that? He was following the instructions, the integrity of his faith. Now, I know that it's almost undigestible for a person to conceptualize Abraham burning up his son as a sacrifice. But don't exit the room this early. There's more to the story that will help you see that this was nothing more than a golden moment to put his internal faith on external display, not for God to know, but for Abraham to know and for subsequent generations. Because of what Abraham did, you and I are still talking about it. So his integrity led Abraham to build the altar, arrange the wood, bind the sacrifice for the burnt offering. His integrity led Abraham to raise his hand to slay the sacrifice, which is his son Isaac, for the burnt offering. Look at verse 10. Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. See, integrity demands a complete follow-through internally and a complete follow-through externally. Integrity demands a complete follow-through internally and a complete follow-through externally. How many times do we make commitments or we make verbal agreements and there is no internal integrity? We at heart did not intend to follow through. And guess what? Since we did not intend to follow through internally, we never followed through externally. What we like to do is to make a verbal commitment, then generate what we call an excuse to justify the absence of internal integrity. But don't do that. All right. Now, following instructions exhibits the faith of your integrity. Now, I've already told you that following instructions exhibit the integrity of your faith, and following instructions exhibits the faith of your integrity. It exhibits the integrity of your faith, but it also exhibits the faith of your integrity. Let's journey the story again with Abraham. His faith led Abraham to believe that he and his son would return after the worship. Go back up to verse number 5 in Genesis chapter 22. Don't overlook this verse when you read this story. Abraham said to his young men, now those are the men that went with him in addition to his son. He said to his young men, stay here with the donkey, and I and the lad, now that's his son Isaac, I and the lad will go over there. All right. He said to the men, you stay here. My son and I are going over there. Well, he says, we're going to go over there. Watch the rest of the verse. We will worship and return to you. So there was no doubt in Abraham's mind at all that Isaac would be alive when he returned to the men. So his faith led Abraham to believe that he and his son would return after the worship. Now, he may have had no idea how it was going to happen, but he believed that it would happen. Now, my friend, you and I need to have faith in many instances on what will happen, though we don't know exactly how it's going to happen. God has the recuperative power and ability to restore, to revitalize, but he doesn't have the responsibility to tell us how he's always going to do it. So his faith led Abraham to believe that God would provide. Look at verse number 7 of Genesis 22. Now envision Abraham and his son Isaac going to offer the burnt offering. No doubt Isaac, his son, had seen his father offer burnt offerings before. He obviously had some knowledge of burnt offerings. So listen to the conversation in verse 7 and 8 of Genesis 22. Isaac spoke to Abraham, his father, and said, my father. And he said, here I am, my son. And he said, behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Why would Isaac ask such a question? He was knowledgeable of what was offered. He was knowledgeable of what was involved in a burnt offering. He said, Daddy, I see the fire. I see the wood, but where is the lamb? You've always offered a lamb. So where is the lamb? Now look at verse number 8, Genesis 22. Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. So the two of them walked on together. So Abraham obviously then convinced his son Isaac to keep moving forward toward the sacrifice. So his faith led Abram to believe that God would provide. His faith led Abraham to believe that God was able to resurrect Isaac even had he slain him. Listen to the New Testament interpretation of the Abraham story. Hebrews chapter 11 and verse number 17 through 18. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises was offering up his only begotten son. It was he to whom it was said, in Isaac your descendants shall be called. See, God had told Abraham, I'm going to bless you through your descendant Isaac. In order for God to bless Abraham through Isaac's descendants, seeing that Isaac had no heirs at this time, the only option was for God to raise him from the dead had he been slain. Now look at Hebrews chapter 11 and verse number 19. Here's the commentary on the mindset of Abraham. He considered that God is able to raise people even from the dead, from which he also received him back as a type. Abraham said, you know what? The God who placed people on earth can raise people back from the dead if he so chooses. So if he so chooses for me to externally follow through with this sacrifice, God is able to raise him from the dead and give me biological descendants through the son that God had promised him. His faith led Abraham to believe that. See, instructions invite an external exhibition of your internal integrity. And when you consider what I'm sharing with you, you will never look at instructions ever again the same way. Instructions are simply an opportunity for you to externally exhibit your internal integrity. Let me illustrate it this way. If you are a student in class, you have studied, you have learned the lesson content. No one knows it until the instructor gives you an examination. So the examination simply gives you an opportunity to place your knowledge on display. Aren't you proud when you get a chance to place your knowledge on display? Well, when you follow instructions, you're getting a chance to place your faith, the integrity of your faith, and the faith of your integrity, you get a chance to place them on display. Now, let's consider several observations that will help us to make this a practical reality in our everyday life. When children honor the healthy instructions of their parents, they exhibit their integrity. Children, by honoring their parents' instructions, by doing what mother and father, by following the healthy instructions they exhibit their integrity. Well, what's the benefit of them exhibiting their integrity? Whenever you exhibit externally the integrity of your internal faith, then God blesses you. And it doesn't matter what the environment is. See, this is why you ought to follow instructions. This is why you ought to place the integrity of your faith on display. See, when you do this, when you follow instructions, it just makes for a much more cooperative experience. So when you honor the healthy instructions of your parents, you exhibit your integrity. Now notice what God does. Ephesians 6, verses 1 through 3. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may be well with you and that you may live long on the earth. Now, here's what God has just told us. Children, obey your parents, follow their instructions, place your internal integrity on external display. And if you do that toward your parents, then I'll reward you. Isn't that amazing? So children, you obey your parents so that you can be not only rewarded by them, but rewarded by God as well. Now listen to this. When citizens honor the healthy instructions of their government, they exhibit their integrity and God blesses them. Oh, I know that's a sticky point for some people, but don't be a chaotic causing individuals. Listen, obey government instructions, the healthy instructions. Don't be so quick to be objective just because you don't want anyone exercising authority over you. When the policeman says stop, stop. If the policeman said don't go down that street, go down this street, follow the instructions. Recently, we've had all kinds of upheaval in our nation. Young men are being murdered in the streets, and that shouldn't happen. Their behavior should not solicit such an adverse response. But guess what? We need to begin telling our citizens, be cooperative. And if you're cooperative, much of the confrontation will never take place. Now listen to Paul writing to the Christians, Romans chapter 13 and verse number 1. Every person is to be in subjection to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God. And those which exist are established by God. Therefore, whoever resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God, and they will have opposed, will receive condemnation upon themselves. For rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. Do you want to have no fear of authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. Now, here is what Paul said. If you follow instructions, then the one who gives you the instruction will praise you for doing so. Now notice verse 4 of Romans chapter 13. For it is the minister of God to you for good. But if you do what is evil, be afraid, for it does not bear the sword for nothing. For it is a minister of God, an avenger, who brings wrath on the one who practices evil. Now look back again at the beginning of verse 4, talking about government. It is the minister of God to you for good. Okay, so when citizens honor the healthy instructions of their government, they exhibit the integrity of their faith, and God blesses you. Do you realize that God blesses you for being obedient? Do you realize that if the policemen say, listen, don't go down that street, it's closed, turn, go down this street, and you obedient, do so? Do you realize that God blesses you for that? He blesses you for following instructions everywhere. When employees honor the healthy instructions of their employer, they exhibit their integrity. And guess what? God blesses them. Listen, if you're always arguing back and forth with your supervisor at work, no wonder your life is so raggedy and so messed up. No wonder you do not enjoy the finer things of life. It is because you are not following instructions. Paul writes to the church at Colossians in chapter 3 and verse 22. He uses the term slaves. Well, a slave was the minority of the economic authority and the minority of the social influence. Now, some people just get all bent out of shape when you see the word slave. But the word slave simply means that there is someone who holds the majority of the economic authority. And there's someone who holds the majority of the social influence. Well, it is obvious that your employer holds the majority of the economic authority. So guess what? You really have a slave relationship with your employer. Listen, you have a slave relationship with your children because you hold the majority of the economic authority and the majority of the social influence. That's what a slave-servant relationship is. Now, how one became a slave is significant, and how one exercises that authority is significant. But listen, according to God's design, there is no person who has a greater level of authority over another than parents do over children. God gave total authority of parents over children. So the question is not whether someone has authority over you. The question is, how are they using that authority? Now, God did not give unilaterally, without any restrictions, authority to government over its citizens. They have a responsibility. But parents have unquestionable authority over their children, up to and including making life and death decisions for them when they are young. You decide what medical treatment, what we're going to do about this. So it's not that one has the majority of the authority. The question is, how is it used? So then don't raise your blood pressure over the word slaves. Don't get all bent out of shape over that, because there is some capacity where you are a slave. You can talk about how free you are all you want to, but there is someone that exercises economic authority over you. And if you don't think that's the case, stop paying your mortgage and you'll let Bank of America will show you who has the economic authority. And they will call the governing authorities and they will escort you right out of the house that you have made monthly payments on for 10 years. So stop all of that nonsense about, I don't want to be a slave. You are a slave. You have a slave relationship. And we often do that in a willingly. The proverb writer said the lender becomes slave, the borrower rather becomes slave to the lender. Every time you go out and get a credit card, every time you buy something on credit, you are engaging in a slave relationship with whoever loaned you the money because they dictate the terms. You, just like me, have received in the mail a letter from your credit card company that says, we have changed your payment date. We have changed your interest rate. We have done whatever. So don't get all bent out of shape over that word slave. Now we're ready for Colossians chapter 3 and verse 22. Slaves, in all things, obey those who are your masters on earth, not with external service as those who merely please men, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do, do your work heartily as for the Lord rather than for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance. Now, here is what Paul has just said. When you, in your slave relationship, when you are engaging with one who has a majority of the economic influence over you, you obey the instructions as if you're doing it for the Lord, and the Lord rewards you. Listen, when Christians go to their job every day, they're being paid double. They're being paid by the employer, and you're being paid by God. So if you're working side by side with a person who has not been born again, you are making more than they are making. Absolutely. So one reason you ought to become a Christian is so you can make more money on the job. That's right. That's absolutely right. Because see, God knows how to keep your expenses low so that your income goes further. So God knows how to get a pay raise to his people. He can get a pay raise to his people without having to go through the company. So if you are a Christian, you are being compensated more than your non-Christian friends. So guess what? You ought to act better than they do. It's a shame for your non-Christian friends on the job to be more cooperative with the company than you are. Shame, shame on you. When believers honor the healthy instructions of their leaders, they exhibit their integrity. Paul talks about that in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 12 through 13. You can speak confidently when you are exhibiting integrity. See, when you exhibit the integrity of your faith, you can trust God confidently and you know that he will deliver. Listen to Abraham's statement in verse number 5 of Genesis 22. We're going to go worship and we will return. He can speak confidently. You will be blessed when you are exhibiting integrity. Look at Genesis 22 and verse number 17. Indeed, I will greatly bless you, and I will greatly multiply your seed as the stars of the heavens and as the sand which is on the seashore, and your seed shall possess the gate of their enemies. Listen, God wants you to speak favorably of instructions. So from this day forward, change your attitude about instructions. Don't get upset. Welcome instructions. Instructions are an opportunity for you to externally exhibit your internal integrity. Everybody you know needs to hear this. Thank you in advance for helping us get the word out to them. Give us a thumbs up. Even if you've already given us one thumbs up, give us another one. Post your favorable comment, even if you've already posted one favorable comment. Subscribe to our channel. Click on the live notification button and click on the share link and share this message with everyone you know. My friends, following in instructions will improve the quality of life for you and everyone you know. The reason the world is as painful and as miserable as it is because someone, and in this case, most of us, are not following instructions. Be encouraged and be blessed.